Hello and welcome to season 5, episode 12 of Dualistic Unity. I am being myself. Tried a lot of shit over the years. Tried to be a lot of things. And while I was always being myself, I was always trying to be something. And even just recently, it's hitting me hard that I can really just be myself, the me that I am right now. It's all on the table, right? But I don't know. This one's typically the easiest to be, so might as well go with that one.
And you're always learning what that means to a greater and greater degree. You're always feeling out what it means to be yourself. And as you do so, your relationships change, the choices you make change, your direction or your goals, if you'd like to call it that, they change. Everything changes as you learn how to be more and more yourself. And vice versa, of course. The less you feel that you can be yourself, the more things change in that direction, which is the distortion that we're always talking about. But if you just have the courage to let go and be what you already are, that experience will deepen for you and you will start to grow, and those around you will benefit from it. But on that road, there are constant temptations to go back to the mentality that you've known for so very long. And by that mentality, I mean reacting to fear as though you have to be afraid, when in fact, you can be afraid and not give in to that fear. You can want to attach to someone to make yourself feel better, but you don't have to. You can want to try and achieve something to make yourself feel better, but you don't have to. You can want to avoid certain things so you don't have to feel certain things, but you don't have to. You can just carry on moving forward without ever having to overthink it, without ever having to doubt that you're doing the right thing. Feel what you're feeling and grow accordingly. And I say all of this because I go through it all the time. I've been on this path for a very long time, as we've discussed previously. And by the path, I mean just the practice of being myself. I didn't know how to do that for a long time. I didn't think that that was enough. And I used the circumstances of my life. I used all of the things that had happened to me during the course of my life as justification to believe that I wasn't enough. But the addiction was to thinking about myself as though I could be more. And as I let that go, I stopped needing things in the same way. I stopped being drawn to things in the same way. I stopped being tempted by things in the same way because I wasn't trying to fulfill that sense of lack. And so all of my friendships changed. And by changed, I mean some of them just ended, and not always in an amicable way. And it's because those relationships were largely based on decisions I had made previously, decisions that I had made in a state of mind where it was coming from need rather than appreciation, where it was coming from a sense of lack rather than a sense of fulfillment. And so a necessary byproduct of my change was my environment changing. And because everybody has the right to try and stay as who they think they are or to try and be something other than what they are, you don't get to determine whether or not people are going to react very well to you just being yourself, to you abandoning the path to being something entirely. Because whether people know it or not, sometimes they will feel abandoned by you just deciding that you're okay the way you are. And that might seem odd at first until you remember that at one point you were invested in that path as well. And so over and over in my life, I have made the choice to not give in to my fear of not being enough, to look at my need or my urge to attach to people, attach to things, attach to concepts, attach to paths, and to recognize that I don't need those. And as I've done that, all of my relationships have changed. I've managed to form better relationships because that need is not there. But those relationships have been formed because I'm not trying to form them. And because of that, there's no fear of them ending. Because I'm okay with them changing, there's no fear of that either. Because often the change that we're afraid of, the change that we're resisting, is just the change in ourselves. We will hold on to certain friendships because, frankly, we're comfortable there. And if we were to change, we might upset the person that we're a friend with. But is that really the concern? Or is it just fear of what the change would mean in your life? Fear that you may have to leave this friend behind, fear that perhaps being with you on your path isn't the best thing for them, that they have a lesson they could learn if you weren't there. These are all lessons that we have to learn and relearn and apply all the time until we recognize that you can just be, and that you've never needed to attach to anyone or anything because you've always been one with everything.
That reminds me a lot of the very first video of yours that I ever came across. That recognition that I think it was a 2005 video, that no matter what you're going through, no matter whether you're surrounded by people or, alone in the forest or up on a mountain or swimming out in the ocean, you're alone essentially in your experience. And so it's, I don't know, everything you were just saying just kind of reminds me of that realization, and how much we we stretch into other people, or think that someone else is going to do something for us, or fix something in us, or fill some void in us, be it, someone that you're very close to and have been for a very long time, or someone, you pass on the street that, you're concerned about whether they're going to judge you or not, or compliment you or not. It's the micro to the macro of a outreach of someone else, an outreach to someone else. The thought of there being someone else that could ever do anything for you, to you, and really have an impact beyond the impact that you have of yourself, right? And it always does come back to that. But it doesn't mean, that realization in and of itself doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a lot of things and difficulties in that realization. Like that at its core, that recognition that everything you go through is just you, is the depths of what we are. That's digging into the core of what is that experience of being alone together. And so, and even saying together is like, yeah, it's just interesting how much we maybe sometimes invest in that idea of other people in any way, shape, or form, or the thought that someone could fill something for us is always right there. Like it's kind of at the fabric of our experience in a sense, or at least to some degree. And it's an interesting, I don't know, balance between that recognition and feeling everything that has to do with, the experience of being with other people. Because, neither side is correct or even accurate necessarily. As we're talking, all the words that I'm using, one side or the other, be it the perception of other people or the recognition that there aren't, it's still just what reality is.
It really just comes down to the fact that, as you said, nothing changes. People are still people, and you're still you. It's the perception of division that fades, and with that, all the need and the uncertainty and everything else. And what I mean is that, okay, well, how common is this? Say you meet someone new. It doesn't even have to be someone that you're romantically interested in. Say you just met a friend. You hit it off. Things are going well. You're like, hey, give me a call one time. They're like, sure. What's your number? You give them your number, and then they don't call. And like a month goes by. How often have you thought about the fact that they didn't call? How often have you, in fact, started thinking about whether or not you did something wrong? How often have you started playing it out? Like perhaps there's something that you had done that reflected on whether or not this person thought you were valuable or worthwhile or any of that. And that's kind of the point. All of that, all of those thoughts, while they're good to let them process, aren't the truth and don't really matter. Right? The fact is that they didn't call. They didn't call. And that doesn't have to hurt in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't have to mean anything about you at all. And more often when they do call, if they do call, they'll just tell you, oh, I'm sorry, I was out of town. Or, hey, I got caught up in things. And how often has that happened to us? How often has it happened where we go through this whole thing in our head? Oh my God, they hate me. And they weren't even thinking about you. Right? And that's very much the point, is recognizing that the thoughts about whether or not they hate you, the fact that that's even important to you, really just comes down to being an option. You don't have to give in to those thoughts and have the emotional response that goes with them. You can let them go, and you can continue with your life and not feel separate from life, not feel any lack whatsoever. It's not to say that you wouldn't take it in if you were like, oh, maybe I was rude there, and then look at it and go, no, I'm good with that. Or, oh, yeah, I was a little off that day. And it's okay to be self-honest without self-judgment. It's okay to have the thought, is what I'm saying. It's just how seriously you take that thought, how much you dwell on it, as if thinking about it is going to change the person's opinion of you. All of that is very much optional, and it doesn't do anything for our relationships. It doesn't do anything for how we interact with one another. It makes it so much more difficult. And it really just comes down to the benefit of being yourself. Being yourself means that you don't need someone to validate you. It means that you don't need someone to remind you that you are lovable and likable and valuable and have potential. Being yourself is just being what you are. And that experience crosses over into everything. And I'm bringing this up specifically because people tend to be under the impression that I don't go through things in my life, because frankly, I still have the same expression on my face that I always have with anything, kind of this nonchalant entertainment with the things that I'm going through for the most part. It's not that I don't get serious about things, it's that I don't get too serious about things because it doesn't fucking help. So anybody who's been listening to the show for the last little while may have noticed that I've said a few times that I'm going through a tough patch in my life. Well, that tough path was the end of my marriage. And I want to make it clear, because a few people have asked, what do I mean by marriage? No, there's no certificate. There's no ceremony. There was none of that. It was a marriage of agreement. And I said that from the very beginning. We are here because we want to be. We are here because we are free to be. And today is enough. But as you have a relationship with people, it is very easy to get attached to that person. And if not attached to the person, attached to their presence, attached to a trajectory that your brain is creating for you about where you might go in the future. And it's very easy to get lost in thinking about that. And then things suddenly change. And then life itself interjects and goes, actually, the path that you thought you were on isn't really the path. Things are changing dramatically under your feet. Where do you want to go? And what's important is to recognize that being yourself means making choices for yourself. Very often we'll make choices for the quote unquote relationship, but that in itself takes away the other person's choice as well. And it's not to say that one person can't choose to go in the same direction as the other. The point is that they should have the right to choose. And every step of the path is an opportunity to go in the way that helps you learn to be yourself more and more and more. But attachment deviates us from that path. Fear of being alone, fear of uncertainty, fear of letting go of that invisible trajectory that your brain is creating for you, unfortunately makes it difficult to allow yourself and the other person the space to change in the way that's best for them. But again, getting into a relationship that's not based on need allows you to change that relationship more easily than getting into a relationship that's based on need and then trying to change that from within. And I say that from experience, because the relationship that I was in lasted 18 years. Best experience of my life. Absolutely what I needed to learn about love and compassion and empathy and slowing down and service and being with people. I've learned so much from this, but that isn't to say that that has to continue the way it did. That isn't to say that that's the best path that must continue on for either of us, because perhaps there are lessons that I need to learn, and perhaps there are lessons that she needs to learn. That can't happen so long as we continue to hold on to a trajectory just because it was familiar. So the nice part about all this, for anybody who is wondering, is that there is no toxicity in this change in my life. It was just an adjustment, and that adjustment period required a little bit of getting used to. But we are still friends. We talk all the time. She actually doesn't live very far from me. She is still the mother of my daughter and still the best friend I've had for half of my life. And that hasn't changed. And we're able to maintain that. We're able to actually deepen our relationship because of that solid foundation, that it was never based on need. And the idea of letting go of that trajectory, the idea of letting go of where we thought we were going, although painful, is obviously what's best for both of us, just by how close we've become in giving ourselves the space to grow as we need to. So I'm saying this from life experience. It may suck to let go of what you think you want. It may suck to let go of a relationship or a friendship or a dream. But the only reason it truly sucks is because you really wanted it and you don't know that it's the best thing for you or the people that were involved. Perhaps the lessons that you've learned are going to take you on to something else. And of course they are. They always do.
Always, right? I really appreciate you sharing all of that, Ray. And it's interesting the perspective of, how much the things that we do are reflections from a broader standpoint, societal standpoint, are reflections of our overarching desire for certainty. And when it comes to marriage, the whole till death do us part thing is just, especially when you realize that you don't you don't die when you die, it's like the idea of it having to be the exact period of time that you happen to be here is just such a convoluted way of looking at relationships. Like, you get in it and then you're trapped for the rest of your life, despite the people involved changing. And so there's multiple layers of, in typical relationships, like resistance to change, resistance to changing yourself because you don't want to be a different person than the person that entered the relationship, because then that may shake the relationship. You don't want the other person to change. So if they start acting differently, change is all of a sudden a bad thing, despite it happening at all times. And then there's the consideration of the relationship itself changing, and that constantly being a morphing thing. And so people will resist all of that change just to maintain this thing that is I don't know, lauded in our society for some strange reason, just because it's this false certainty in regards to the relationship, and that being such a focus for us, despite it not being a necessary component of reality. Like, relationships are always going to be a component of reality, but the way that we've kind of structured it is just very interesting. And so I know you went into it with eyes wide open, right? You were fully aware of that, but it doesn't mean that it actually happening doesn't fucking hurt, isn't painful. That's like a component of change, is shifts, and so it's a powerful thing to go through, especially having your eyes open to the reality as you went through it. But it's and I know that you've learned a lot about it and a lot about yourself through it. And so it's another component of your life, another experience that you have the opportunity to learn, and then, the relationship shifts. But the choices, you were mentioning choices that people make, and just relationships in general, how often we make choices for the idea of the relationship itself, as opposed to a consideration for both myself and the person I'm in a relationship with. Like, oftentimes, and this isn't even downplaying it, like, I feel like most of the time people prioritize the relationship, the idea of the relationship itself, over the experience of either of the people, or maybe you're in a bunch of people and in the same relationship, and the considerations of everyone's experience in that relationship. But will actually, because we live in conceptual, value-based world where we're just assuming our value based on something, like, we'll actually prioritize a idea of a situation and maintaining that and fighting for that to stay the same despite everything around it shifting and changing, as opposed to coming back to what's best for the people that not only are in the relationship, but that are the relationship. Like, the idea of the relationship isn't what it is. Like the relationship is a culmination of the two people involved and their entire being. Like the relationship, the idea of it isn't even it. It's just the experiences of the people involved that make the relationship what it is. And so as those shift, inevitably the relationship shifts in some way, shape, or form. And there's just a lot of fear in our world right now that's resistant to change because we don't have faith in ourselves. When things change, it means that new things are going to start happening. And that's what we're afraid of. We're just afraid of the new stuff happening as opposed to just being willing to see that as an opportunity and a continued, exploration of ourself, which is, yeah, cool to see that you're doing that.
Well, it's funny because all of your triggers pop up, but all of your triggers pop up with every major change in your life. Like the end of a relationship, the end of a long-term relationship is very much like mourning somebody's passing on, right? Like it's a change to your entire life. It's a fundamental change to your day in and day out experience that you cannot go back from, right? And so in that, you find the same temptations that you always do, to judge yourself, to judge the other people involved, to feel sorry for yourself, to think that there's got to be some way that I got to make this better. Like all of this, it always pops up. And the point is to just relax and calm down and look at those triggers for what they are, right? Like relationships are a perfect example. And again, I'm super grateful for the relationship that I've had with Melissa up until this point and going forward, simply because there was a lot of toxicity that never really came into play. And what I mean is, relationships are often based on need. It's the reason that we have such high teenage pregnancy rates, and it's the reason that divorce is so high. People get into a relationship because they're looking for something, and that something is a cessation of their pain, a cessation of their sense of lack, and they look for that through the validation of someone else. And so immediately there's pressure in that relationship. Immediately there's an image of that other person. Immediately there's all of this distortion that goes into the relationship. And it's because the relationship was based on need, on a sense of lack, on you not being yourself and not being fulfilled as such. And relationships like that never work. They always end up with a certain degree of toxicity. And if the people stick it out, that relationship ends up being either ugly or they never talk. And so going through this recently, that popped up immediately. Like, oh my God, I'm a failure because the relationship is ending. But the relationship isn't ending. And even if it did, that doesn't mean it's a failure, right? The relationship is changing because the relationship is with myself in the same way her relationship is with herself. And we're being honest with ourselves about the changes that are happening. And so there's no need to fear failure, because failure implies that there was supposed to be some end result, that there was supposed to be some set point that we would reach. But that's the reason that relationships tend to fail, is that people are looking at them as a way to be happy instead of being happy and then forming them.
Oh man, and anytime we're looking to something to be happy, like passing off the responsibility for my joy and my happiness, there's going to be a prioritization of that. Despite, and it's so interesting how it's like you go into it, you're prioritizing that situation because there's this assumption that that's where it comes from. So you're not, even though you're doing it to be happier, to feel more fulfilled, you're still prioritizing that over your experience right now, over yourself, because there's this convoluted fucking thing we do in our head that's like, oh, that's where it is. And then we just lock in on that. We just lock in on that thing. Like, my happiness can't come until I go to this school. My happiness can't come until this person likes me. My happiness can't come until I become VP at my company. What my happiness can't come until my bank account says $10 million or whatever it is. And so there's the prioritization of that. And then once you get it, there's like the defense of that at all costs. Cause and like, why the fuck is that? Like, do we just not think that it could possibly come from us? So it must come from something else. And therefore we just because there's like an underlying assumption that it can't come from us. So we don't even consider it. It's like not even in the realm of possibilities. So we look at something else. We look to something else and just focus in on that. And, when someone's like, well, that's not necessarily going to do it. Did that work out for you? They're like, oh, well, it didn't work out there. So it must be something else. And they just look for something else because they don't realize that it has to come from them because they're seeing themselves as this thing that's a idea in their head. So like happiness can't come from that idea. That idea is being built upon the things that I'm striving for. My idea is being built upon all of those things. So I'm not even anything besides all of the things that I have. So how could my happiness come from anything that's me? Because I'm nothing without all of them. Because we think we are an idea. And like it's all like, I don't know. It seems like it's all just based on that fundamental misunderstanding.
Well, because it sounds really hard, right? I have this idea of myself that my value is something that needs to be built. Therefore, I can't consistently decide that I have value. I need some reason to justify that decision, which is funny because if you think about it, I'm still making the decision. I'm just using justification. I'm still deciding I have value. I'm just using justification. And depending on how you feel about yourself, it's either enough or it's not enough. And that's the problem with justifying whether or not you think you have value, is that it's really an invisible measuring stick. You can keep lifting it or lowering it based on your preferences, based on on how you feel, and therefore it doesn't really exist. That's the whole point, is that we don't have to measure our value. We just have to continue on. But it's so very interesting because I think it really helps to understand that what we're constantly practicing isn't how to get to happiness, but how to interact with our moment to moment existence. So we want to get to a point where I'm in a relationship. Now I have the perfect life. I have a person I'm going to come home to every day. We're going to sit down, we're going to watch TV. Maybe we'll go out dancing from time to time. We'll do vacations. I've got the whole thing in my head. And that will be happiness. And then you get there and you still get triggered by stupid shit. Maybe that person forgets to put the drawer back in and you bang your hip into it and and you get all angry. You can hold on to that shit all day long and it'll poison your relationship because the relationship was never going to make you happy. It's still down to your relationship with yourself. And in a relationship, that's so much more important because your triggers, if unaddressed and if you're unaware of them, will spill out into everything. And before you know it, they will dictate the course of your relationship more than you think. And it's just because you're not willing to look at them. And so everything comes down to a relationship with yourself. It always does. And it's because of that that you can change a relationship, form a relationship, or have a relationship, regardless of how long that might last, whether it's forever or for a very short period of time, and never feel that you are somehow diminished for its passing, that you are somehow failing because it's changed, or that you are somehow less valuable just because the relationship wasn't what you expected it to be, or what you wanted it to be, or what you perceived it should be. It's just what it is. And that gives you an opportunity to be yourself or not.
Yeah, because you're just what you are, right? Your idea of what that should be or where you should be at or what you should be living up to or what type of relationship you should be in or how to handle certain things like is entirely irrelevant. Like you are what you are. The relationship is what it is. The situation is what it is. What are you gonna do with it? And so, oh man, because we're striving for happiness, thinking that it's this perfect sort of situation that just comes together, and yet it's just this little idea of something. And so every time a situation doesn't match that idea, we don't think we can be happy. If it doesn't match that cookie cutter perfect thing that we grew up thinking, maybe you have parents who told you that's what it was, maybe you have friends, maybe it's just coming from you. That so there every fucking moment that you're in that doesn't match that couldn't possibly be it. And so we're on a fucking constant search to match that idea of what we have in our head to the situation that we're in. And until we do that, we'll give up everything to get to that moment. We give up our entire fucking lives to get to that moment, our entire experience to get to that tiny little fleeting moment of what we think happiness is, or what we think, only when I can do this, I'll accept myself. I'll be enough. As long as all of these ducks are in a row, then I'll be okay. And it doesn't happen because it's not reality. It can't happen. That little fleeting idea, it's not even like, oh, once in a while it comes around and someone finds it. It doesn't exist. And so what's left is just you here now. It's just you in the situation that you're in right here, and your relationship to that, and your willingness to live that, to live your life. Like, we'll give up our whole life to find that perfect spot where we're enough, where I can accept myself, where I can feel like I'm whole. And it's just, gotta have this person next to me, gotta have this job going on, gotta have this thing happening, gotta be seen in this way. All of these things, a checklist of fucking 100 things that never happens. It never, ever, ever happens. That situation doesn't exist. The potential for it is in every experience that we have, but even that, the potential for what? The potential for all happiness is a made up fucking idea of perfection inside of your head. So it's not even that it exists here now, it just isn't the thing that you think it is, and it isn't what this is about. Like, you are what is. You're just what is. This life isn't the meaning of life isn't to be happy. I think Ray said it in season 1 or 2. The point of life isn't to be happy. The point of life is to be life. Like, it's just what you are. Your opinion of it is irrelevant. And it's actually the opinion of it that keeps you from fully living life. So if anything, it's the willingness to let go of the false certainty that comes with the opinion that what you're going through shouldn't be happening, that you should be different than you are, that there's a perfect spot in the future that's going to complete you, that you're going to feel valuable. Like, that's all it is letting go of the certainty and being willing to live what is and be life here and now.
And to constantly be willing to learn about yourself. That's really the biggest thing. And people have often asked, like, well, you should have expectations in a relationship, shouldn't you? And I've always taken a hard stance on no. And the reason is simply because establishing boundaries is different than expecting somebody to respect them. So you can establish a boundary and you will have a good, strong relationship if the other person respects that boundary. But if you expect them to, and then they don't, and you get all upset about it, you're not really establishing a boundary, are you? If anything, you're looking for that argument. You want to be in conflict, right? You can just establish the boundary, and if they don't respect it, then you have the opportunity right then and there to change the relationship, to change your direction. But attachment and fear of loss will distort your choices. And so this is why it's so important to recognize that if you're getting into a relationship based on some expectation that that relationship will make you happy, then that expectation will more or less continue on for the rest of your relationship. You'll be expecting them to act a certain way. You'll be expecting them to respond a certain way. You'll be expecting them to perceive you a certain way. And that's when everything starts to go downhill. And you can feel it going downhill. You might be denying it, like, oh, well, if we could just get it together and all that. But the fact is what you're witnessing is a certain degree of friction. And that friction comes from trying to hold on to a fictional relationship that is in contradiction to the actual relationship that you're experiencing. And if you let go of the fiction, you would be better able to adapt to the actual relationship that you were experiencing, which means that the distortion would start to fade, the toxicity would start to fade. And it's only because you would be coming back down to a point where you can talk about what is rather than avoiding what is for the sake of holding on to what you would want to be. This is always the case with all relationships. This is also the case with where we work. We will put up with things because we're afraid to change. We will put up with things because, frankly, we don't know what we would do if things were to change. But that's often why we end up in the situation that we want to change, was because of the law, was because of that sense of lack that drove us to go there. So the only thing you can do in that state is leap. The only thing you can do is make a decision for yourself. And if you do that, sure, if you're not used to doing that, you're going to lose a lot of relationships. You're going to lose a lot of people in your life that, frankly, don't want you to stop playing that game. They want to play that game, and you not playing it is going to be a bit of a threat. But as you get better at it, as you just continue being yourself, you will start to meet people who do resonate with that. You will start to form relationships that aren't based on need. You will start to form relationships that can change due to mutual respect and the space that was never lost. And true, it will still hurt to some degree to see a friend leave your life. It will still hurt to some degree when you decide to change in a certain direction and the change of another person doesn't match up with that because you've enjoyed them. But the point is that they were part of your life to begin with. Look at the benefit and look at the fact that they have helped prepare you for whatever is next. And the same is true for them. But because we tend to perceive things from that state that I'm not enough, losing that person, even the expression that you're losing that person, changes tone.
Well said. And we have such a aversion to pain too, like the idea that certain things shouldn't hurt. Like that's just another idea of what something should or shouldn't be. Like something changing, something ending, there's going to be discomfort, there's going to be pain that you go through. Like I find it so interesting how many people I hear talk about things like, oh, well, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna be painful, it's gonna be difficult. And like whoever said that that wasn't a part of this experience, whoever said that wasn't a massive component of the spectrum of experiences that we go through. And sometimes making the leap into something new, there's a lot of pain that can come with it. But and something else I feel like, there's sometimes questions about when it comes to relationships is the idea of, oh, well, if I'm letting go of my preferences, like how far do I let them go? And how far do I, you know, where do I find the line between me holding on to my preferences and me letting things go and like, going with the flow in the relationship? And I think, at least from my perspective, like there is no should with it. So it's not really about, oh, well, you should let go of all of your preferences and let this other person, I don't know, walk all over you or something. It's like there's no should with that, and there's no shouldn't when it comes to the other side of standing your ground with certain preferences. Like we so badly want a fucking rule book. Like, oh, so all I have to do is let go of X number of preferences, and then they'll stick around, and then things will work out. And if they don't, yeah, 5 preferences. And if they don't, then it's on me to make a shift or something. And it's like, no, there's no fucking guideline. There's no manual. There's no rule book. There's no should. There's no shouldn't. And it's not something that we can give you when it comes to any relationship. All it is a sensitivity to your experience. And, because a lot of times when maybe a relationship should end, there's a resistance to that because there's a prioritization of the relationship staying together itself. And so, who's to say that's better or worse than the other? It's where it comes from. It's what are you holding on to and why? And what do you think you're going to gain from it? Are you holding on to, some desire for a false certainty that this is going to fill some void? If that's the case, it's like, be aware of that and just be aware of where those things are coming from. But there's no should or shouldn't. There's no objectively correct way to handle any relationship, which even as I'm saying that, I'm kind of like, I really want there to be. Like I really fucking want there to be just something to follow that'll get there, but there isn't. And that's really where you start to feel more empowered, is that there is no rule book outside of you. Like you're the one who's the best one for every job that you come into, every situation that you come into, every choice that you have to make. There is no rule book or set of guidelines or fucking manual that could be better prepared for that exact situation in that exact moment than you. All of reality has culminated into a specific experience for you to make a decision. And so there couldn't possibly be a rule book or fucking guidelines that could be better at that. It doesn't even make any sense that there could possibly be. It's like you're you, you've lived you more and better and more frequently than anyone else and made more decisions as you than anyone else. So how could there possibly be anyone who's better fit for the job, for making the decision, making the change, making the move, making the shift than you?
Isn't that so funny? Like the entirety of our life really just comes down to our relationship with ourselves, which is our relationship with our acceptance of ourselves or our relationship with our idea of ourselves and all of the fun that it causes. But then we get into a relationship with another person. And somehow we think that that has stopped being our relationship with ourselves. But it always, always was. And I find that to be so very important to remember. It goes back to what we were talking about in terms of selfishness and selflessness. Right? Like people want to know, well, should I get into the relationship? Yeah, okay. Does that mean you should hold on to it? Does that mean it should last a certain amount of time or you haven't given it, the full try? No, it doesn't mean anything whatsoever. It means that if you're in a relationship, you have a moment to moment decision on whether or not you are going to react to reality as if you lack something, as if there's something that can threaten you, as if there's something that you need to protect. Right. And so when your partner does something that flusters you and annoys you because it's not up to your expectations, that is your opportunity to work on your relationship with yourself. And you might think it's your opportunity to tell them about your boundaries and what you expect. The fact is that why do you have that expectation? Do you need it? And this is a chance to be self-honest. And what you find is that a relationship is a lesson in service. A relationship is a lesson in how many reasons you want to hold on to what you want rather than just be. And so that can be really valuable. On the other hand, that can also get taken advantage of, in which case now a relationship becomes a lesson in letting go, a lesson in whether or not you are actually helping the other person by just giving them everything that they want, or you're being a hindrance to their growth. And so the relationship always comes back down to you. It's always a relationship with yourself. It's basically always just a relationship with whether or not you are being whole.
And that's where both extremes come into play, right? It's on the one side complete and total freedom through that responsibility, but also complete and total responsibility for everything. And so it's both not only the ability to respond in any way, shape, or form that you would like to, but also the responsibility for everything that you're going through. Like it's funny how I feel like I basically just said the same thing, but it's the realization that it's on you, that it's all on you, not necessarily what's going on. Because I think, you know, someone may hear that and think, oh, control, like I should know what's happening and have everything figured out. And it's not that at all. It's the realization that it's already you happening. It's already all you doing it. So there isn't a divided you that could even have control of anything that you're not already doing anyway. And you sit on that and it's like, I don't know if that's really something you would want, because that kind of negates experience in a sense. But it's the willingness to be both entirely involved in the situation without thinking that it means anything about you either, and seeing the influence that you can have over any situation without the fear of it going in a way that you wouldn't want it to go. And so it's both participating and letting go of your idea of what it should be, and just finding out what it is, and depending upon your mentality and what what you're going through or what you're willing to let go of as you go through it, that situation will inevitably change according to whatever mentality is being embodied in that situation. And it will change because it's always doing so based on you to some degree in some way, shape, or form, but it's not it's not via what you think should be happening because that's not because you're not fully in the situation as that's happening anyway. And so you're not even really seeing it because you're caught in what you want it to be based on some idea of what you feel like is going to make you better or more whole or more valuable or whatever. And it's all just assumption. So it's like to actually be involved in the situation, you have to let go of your idea of what it should be.
And be completely responsible for how you respond to it, moment to moment to moment to moment. Right. But how often in a relationship do we say, oh, I'm having a bad day because my partner did this and this and this, as opposed to, this is what happened and I'm choosing not to let that bother me. Right. And just understanding where it comes from and making a decision accordingly. But it's very often the case that we get upset and resentful. And it's because of our own expectations. It's because of our own needs, which often we bring into the relationship because we bring it into everything. We bring it into the decisions we make in terms of where we want to work. We bring it into the decisions we make in terms of what we want to wear. Right. It always comes back down to our relationship with ourselves. If I don't feel like enough, I'm going to make decisions that make me feel like I'm more. Right. And that is true in relationships. And what a terrible responsibility to put on the other person. Right. But the point is that if you find yourself in that relationship, if you find yourself, say, 5 years into a relationship where you're like, oh, wow, we've really ended up in this place where we're not communicating and there's a lot of expectation, you can just bring that up. But we don't. We don't because we're afraid it's the end of the relationship. Like that somehow was the point. The point of your relationship is you and the lessons that you learn about yourself and the life that you can continue to lead afterwards. Right. And the same is true for the other person. What a terrible shame to make two people suffer just because they're afraid to let go. When both of those people could learn from the experience and in letting go, grow and find themselves learning new things that will lead to the next relationship. And I think this is the reason that it's so important to not rush into romantic relationships. But we do, and we do because it's everywhere around us. Once you have someone who loves you, you're set for the rest of your life, right? What is the problem with just making friends? What is the problem with seeing someone without necessarily tying yourself to their hip immediately, right? Because often breakups happen because we do that shit too quickly. And we do that shit too quickly because we think the commitment to the relationship is what's going to make it work, rather than the commitment to your own growth, which means authenticity, vulnerability, expression. And that is what leads to you being able to embody the love that you feel for yourself and reflect it onto the person that you're with and everyone you're with. Right. But as we've said numerous times, including in our dating and relationships workshop, the need is what kills the relationship because the need is reflective of the relationship you have with yourself. And until you are whole and fulfilled in yourself, and that relationship is one of ease and acceptance, everything reflects that. But that said, in that state, you can have a relationship and maybe it'll last for a long time. Maybe it'll change. Maybe it'll become romantic. Maybe it will stay a friendship. Maybe you'll move apart and talk to each other every 10 years. Who knows? But the point is that without the need, there is no reason to lash out and vilify the other party. And how often does that happen? When relationships end, somebody has to be in the wrong. Why? Because you feel hurt? Perhaps you feel hurt because of the expectations you went into the relationship with, because there are certain decisions that you made that now you're beating yourself up for. And you don't have to. That's the point. You can learn from them. And that will inform the next relationships that you experience. Right? But it just comes down to recognizing that it was always a relationship with yourself. And it still is. And if it's ending and you're looking at the other person, blaming them, stop, look at it, understand. There's no blame. Change happens. Perhaps it became toxic because you put off that change for too long. Change is going to happen regardless. You can try and run from it, or you can accept it, but you'll run from it if you're afraid of it.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting how backwards it is too. Like the recognition going into a relationship that you can just be yourself. Like you can just be yourself. That'll give you your best odds as opposed to being something or trying to be something. But the more you're willing to just be that and explore that and find out what that means, the less need you have for a relationship, right? Because you're good with where you're at. And so even talking with people and talking about how it's the best odds to just be yourself. It's like because they have this perspective of themselves that's so convoluted and backwards and just holding on to that certainty that they're holding on to is part of the reason they're getting into the relationship. And so there's a feeling like I can't just be myself because that self is not adequate, is not enough. And so I need the other person. And it's like, so you're going into it trying to be something for them, thinking that it's not going to be a toxic dumpster fire bag of shit. Like, of course it will be. But then it's funny how it goes hand in hand, how when you start being willing to just be yourself, or at least let go of the certainty that what you think you are is what you are, and be willing to be uncertain, be willing to continue to explore and see what you're capable of, you start finding that there isn't so much need behind that. And then relationships are totally different. You go into relationships with your eyes wide open, still prioritizing you and your experience. And so when they do come around, it's it's not this like crazy, oh, I hope this is it. I hope this is the one, with pressure the moment that you sit down at your first date. It's like, holy fuck. Even just thinking at our like thinking about our whole society, how that is like a massive focus. Like it's one of the biggest things that we collectively focus on. There's nations that have gone so far as to have arranged marriages. There's certain, or maybe it's more religion specific, to have arranged marriages, to just take that false certainty just a step further. It's not that you're going to stay together forever. It's we're going to come together and choose to ensure that you have someone that you can be with forever, so that we can be certain that our child has someone with them and they're set and they're good. Like we've taken that need to such an extreme that, I mean, some societies, they don't even give people room to breathe as they're growing up to find out that they're okay just being them. It's like this crazy reinforced mentality that you're not enough. You need this person. You know, we hear it on the Hallmark cards, like you complete me, like just reinforcing that I'm not complete on my own, that I'm half, like 50% valuable until then, or 10%. And you know, they have the other person feeling 90%, and that's not uncommon, I don't think. But just how, I don't know, just how the fuck did we get to the point that we think that that is the answer, and that will do the thing that we think it will, despite it right in front of our face falling apart, right in front of our face, seeing people who stay in relationships their entire lives and are miserable. And a lot of people, they're not necessarily miserable, but they're they're kind of just feeling stuck. Like, this is, I can't leave this because there's all of these other implications. There's just so many moving parts and like weight to behind this need to be in a relationship, stay in a relationship, maintain a relationship, always be in one, always be seen as something by someone. Because, and it's all just because we don't see it in ourselves, whether we're born into a society or a situation that reinforces it to ourselves, or we're doing it to ourselves, same exact thing. And I know it's just the cycle of it, but it's that misunderstanding that you're something that can gain or lose value. that creates so much fucking half-ass backwards toxicity. It's mind-blowing that it's so normalized to the point that like strangers will, if you're older and not married or with someone, be like, oh, like what's that? Like I've seen that straight up strangers ask someone who's not in a relationship, like, what happened? And like, what the fuck? It's like people asking when someone doesn't drink why they don't drink, and like that's a weird thing. It's so wild, but again, it's just stemming from their own insecurity and their own judgment that would happen if they weren't in it, or need to see themselves in the decisions they make because maybe they sacrificed a fuckload to be in a relationship and sacrifice their entire life and their entire happiness. So they need to make sure that, someone else, if they're not in one and aren't sacrificing all of that, that they're definitely not happy. I'm going to make sure, and I'm going to try and make them less happy by judging them and really bringing them down. It's like, oh man, such a crazy and sad and fucking just weird spot to be in.
Well, and it's profitable. I mean, it really helps to remember that, the revenue from Valentine's Day in the US alone is over $20 billion in a year. Like that's a hell of a profitable reason to start printing cards of I need you, I love you, please be in my life. Right. And that messaging is everywhere. I mean, we have had this archaic notion of marriage for a very long time. And a lot of that stemmed from religion and fear and attachment and all of that fun stuff. And let's not forget ownership at one point. That always is important to remember. But we have this collective idea that the point of life is to grow up and get married and have a child. And because most of our culture is really, really fixated on identity and the sense of lack that goes with it, it's become kind of a generational habit now, to the point where people get together, have a baby, split up, get together with somebody else, have another baby, split up, get together with somebody else, have another baby, maybe two, then split up. And the whole reason is because, well, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to meet somebody and have a baby, and that's what makes the relationship work. But because the relationship was never with yourself, then you're constantly walking into an expectation that can never actually be met. And so if you were to address relationships that way, if you were to really break it down, how many of our relationships are based on just a sense of lack? And how much of that sense of lack is based on the culture reminding us that you are what you think you are? And that is something that you must measure up to your assumptions of other people and evaluate and analyze and keep track of. And so all of that. And so all of a sudden now you have men around you going, got to have women, got to get those women after you. Otherwise, you're not a man. You don't have this experience, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's get rid of all that. Let's get rid of all of that pressure, all of that idea that you must do something, that you must have somebody, that you must be something other than yourself, and map it out over a couple of thousand years. What you would find is a dramatically decreased population to what we currently have, right? Because it would be okay to live a life by yourself. It would be okay to have a relationship that maybe doesn't last the entirety of your life, but ends amicably for both of you, and goes on to lead to other lessons that lead you to other lessons that make more ripples in your life, rather than tying yourself to one person, whether you hate each other or not, and just sticking to it because that's what a marriage does. Otherwise, we are not moral. Otherwise, we're not going to heaven. Otherwise, we're not doing the right thing. Like, so much of that over time has led to the population of 8 billion people that we're currently at. And so many orphans, so many failed relationships, so many unhappy people. And it's all just because of that underlying need. It's because we look at the relationship in the same way that we look at money, in the same way that we look at achieving some dream, like that's going to make me a better person. And it's not, it can't. It's only ever going to be you with what you're doing. It's going to be you with that person. So the relationship with you is the important part.
Always. And the fact that, oh man, the fact that, because I think about, relationships, and I haven't been in a serious one in about 2 years now, but I don't know, and maybe my thoughts will change, and I know I'm still young, but I don't know, like, who's saying that I can't just live my whole life by myself the whole time, and like, maybe have some relationships, maybe never have kids, maybe have, I don't know, fucking 10 5-year relationships for the rest of my life. And
Orgies.
like, and orgy. Exactly. I say we leave this one uncut. Oh gosh, it's so funny that like, say hypothetically I lived the rest of my life just on my own, kept doing all the stuff I'm doing right now to some degree, and just lived my whole life and, lived at 98 and then died. So I got 70 more years. The fact that I could I could do that, and like, it'll be looked at in a certain way is mind blowing. Like, that's crazy that someone can't just be born, live their life, and die. And like, that's this strange, crazy thing. But it's only because we keep buying into the narrative that it has to be another way. Because if you realize that you're whole and complete as you are, like, nothing outside of you can change or waver that. No situation, no person, no child, no nothing can change your value whatsoever in one way or another. Having a kid doesn't raise it. Being in a relationship doesn't raise it. Not being in a relationship doesn't lower it. Not having a kid doesn't lower it. Like, it doesn't do anything to it. And so, like, if people had that mentality going in, like, I could live my entire life by myself and I'd be okay, the health of the relationships that do happen would be astronomically higher. Like, astronomically, the amount of relationships that people wouldn't go into if they had the mentality would be a fuckload, just a lot, just so many, majority, I would say. And then, those that do happen, like, they're happening eyes wide open. Like, this could end at any point and I'd be okay. And actually, I think it would be very low likelihood that this would last for that amount of time. That's so much time. If I were to get, and I have friends who, been in relationships since they're, 18, 20, 22, they're marrying the person. And it's like we spend our whole life attached to someone, or could. And it's like, when you realize that's not necessary, like, the fullness of a relationship that you do go into is, it's just so much more healthy. And the whole idea of a relationship ending being even a slightly bad thing is absurd too. Like, the fact that on a teeter totter of like 50%, that it, for a lot of people, when they think about a relationship ending, the response is, I'm so sorry. Oh no. Like, are you doing okay? And it's not to say that's not a reasonable response. I respond to people, like that a lot of times. But the fact that that's like our go-to is this somber sort of mentality. I guess it's the same with death too, right? It's like, without death, I was talking with someone recently about death, and they were talking about how afraid of death they are and how crazy it is that no one really knows. I was like, and it's funny saying it now, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but like, what's the alternative? You live forever as exactly what you are right now in this, as this, like, and they sat on it for a second. I was like, that's a lot more overwhelming, right? And it's like, and then what? You get to 100, and then it's like, all right, I got a lot more of this time, and you have this like wrinkled raisin of a body. It's like, you really want that thing, the thing that you think you are right now, to last forever? Like, no. And so it's just, it's interesting how we hold on to these ideas, and they're never really the reality of how they play out, and just the absurdity in holding on to these narratives about the shoulds and the right way to live. Just, there's no right way, there's no should. And if I live the rest of my life without getting married ever, or having any kids, like, I don't know, I'd like to think that I'd be quite all right.
I know you would be quite all right. That's the whole point, is that it wouldn't make a difference in terms of you, because you're going to use whatever experience you have moment to moment to moment to grow based on your willingness to do so. See, that's the whole point, is that if you're going into a relationship, it's still you and your willingness to grow. And if you're not willing to grow, then you're going to end up in conflict with the person that you're in a relationship with, because they're also faced with that choice moment to moment, whether to grow or not. And so the friction really comes from both parties not growing, or one party growing and the other one resisting it. Right. And it's so very interesting how this is something that's so commonplace that we have incels now, these involuntarily celibate people who are pissed off about it. It's like, why? You have a hand. Use your hand. Why are you so pissed off about the fact that you're celibate, other than the fact that society has been drilling it into your head that that means something about you? And that's really what it is. And if you loved yourself, if you worked on yourself, if you stopped making it involuntary celibacy and just sucked it up and dealt with it, then somebody may actually find you interesting enough to want to have sex with you, because you're not putting all that pressure on yourself and thus them. It's the whole point, and this is the thing about superficial relationships. Like, we just want to know, this is the thing that's going to make me happy. This is the person who meets my checklist. These are the things that I find attractive and I like. It's like, for how long? And as long as you don't grow, right? Because if you grow and your opinions change, this person's not going to match that anymore. And that's the thing. Like, because we're not looking at a relationship with ourselves, with our own sense of completion, with our own sense of fulfillment, we're not really looking at or attracted to other people based on their sense of fulfillment or their sense of wholeness. And that's when a relationship works, is when the other person doesn't need you to validate them, doesn't need you to like them, doesn't need you in any way, shape, or form, which is why they can be themselves, which is why they're so easy to be around. And that's when a relationship works. But a relationship, as always, is just what it is now. If you have an expectation of it, and this is one of the reasons that I think one of the worst parts about what we've done with relationships is put labels on them. You are now my girlfriend. You are now my fiance. You are now my wife. That doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything except that now you're relying on this idea of commitment. You're relying on this idea of the relationship being different again than it was. And it isn't. The relationship isn't any different now than the day you went out the first time. You are still in a moment-to-moment interaction with your relationship with yourself. That's it. Right? Holding on to some commitment like they're never going to leave me just makes it harder for you to be yourself, because now you're afraid of losing something.
Isn't it interesting how much the idea inevitably shifts a situation, right? As soon as there's a label, like I remember it from high school days. Like, as soon as someone was your girlfriend, all of a sudden that meant something different. But to your point, it doesn't. As soon as someone's your fiance, it's like, what does that change? The day before you propose, the day after you propose. But it's this whole fucking idea of, oh, now we should act this way towards each other. It's like, according to what? Like, why? Why exactly? Oh, now we're married. Now, we got to do this thing. And it's such a strange, and sometimes it's more subtle than obvious, but sometimes it's very obvious. There's like this overnight shift that inevitably always comes with some degree to a label. It comes with the label to some degree. The idea of what a thing isn't it. And it goes for a relationship, and it goes for yourself too. If you're holding on to an idea of what you are, it's always going to be relative to what you should be, or the idealized version of that fucking idea, the platinum version of that idea. Oh, this, and it's the same for relationships. This relationship is this thing. How should this type of relationship be? Oh, it's not that. Well, we got to fix that. Fix it according to what? Fixing it according to who? According to your assumption of what that relationship should be, that's just made up in your head anyway. It just comes from you, your idea of what something should be. We blame society, blame other people, but really it's our own ideas that we're buying into. We're the ones maintaining the idea. We're the ones buying into the idea, maintaining it, perpetuating it. be it of the relationship, of how other people should be, of how we should be. It's like there's no fucking should. And you don't have to label every fucking thing in a certain way just so you can be more sure of what that thing is or what you have. Or now I can point to it. Now I can own it. Now I can feel like I've checked that box. And it's never going to be what you think it is anyway. So I don't know. Think about at least holding on to those labels loosely, because it's not the label. It's not the label anyway.
And I know for anybody listening, if you're in a relationship and you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is all really resonating, I do have to actually make a change. This isn't what's best for me or my partner. I know this deep down, but we have this child. It can be really tempting to think to yourself, well, we'll just hold off. We won't do it because we wouldn't want the child to be hurt. I say this as a parent who just went through this, who has a child. Not being honest with yourself, not being yourself, and any parent is going to know this if they're honest with themselves, teaches your kid not to be themselves. And though we may think that we are sparing them some heartache, and to some degree you might be, fact is you're prolonging the heartache, because it's not like your kid isn't aware that you're unhappy. It's not like your child is not aware of the relationship dynamic. Even if they can't logically put it into words or conceptually describe it, they can still feel it. It's still under the surface. And the only thing that you can do in being honest, the only thing that you can do in having the bravery and the courage and the self-awareness to step up and say, something's got to change. Nobody's fault. Let's just recognize where we're at and make a change for everybody's best interest. It teaches your kid that they can do that, regardless of the fallout. The fact is they have the freedom to just take their life, look at it, and change it. That's really important to teach your kids, because right now what we're often teaching our kids is just get into a relationship. I'm in my third marriage, but if yours fails, just find another person. And it teaches them almost nothing about the fact that a relationship is a sublime opportunity to learn about yourself. And in learning about yourself, you change your relationship with everyone, because you are changing your relationship with everything, because you are everything. But as long as you're operating from a sense of lack, a sense of need, a sense that you have to be something or have something or achieve something or have someone validate you, everything that you do is going to cause more distortion and more suffering. And it's because you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist outside of you perpetuating it.
And it's interesting how often we think that someone else is going to have the same perspective as us. Like we have, say, you are someone who has a kid who's in a relationship in the situation Ray just described. Like we can think that the kid is going to have the same perspective of the relationship that we do, but of course they don't. They're just seeing two people that raised them and people who love them and that they love very much. And so what they're seeing and feeling is you going through it. And like as an adult, we kind of forget that kids don't always feel things or see things or maintain an idea. Like they haven't been indoctrinated by society to think that a relationship is a certain thing that should last forever, that your values derive from, yada, yada, yada. All they're doing is feeling what's happening, the reality of what's happening. And so you being willing to step into change, if you're in that situation, is just showing them that it's okay to step into change and to make shifts and make changes and let go of certain situations. But because people do, and I hear it so often with parents, like stay together for the kids, stick together for the kids, right? Despite the reality of the relationship being a absolute fucking toxic bonfire, like still stay together. And it's like the kids don't even recognize the relationship in the same way you do. It's just you're just doing it for yourself at that point. It's just a selfish endeavor. And it's like we will use a kid as an excuse to maintain it, like, oh, we got to do it, gotta looking out for the kid. But like they feel the reality of the situation right now, and they're feeling everything that you're doing in trying to maintain this fictitious thing. So they don't have the same idea of what a relationship is or should be as the adults going through it. And so the best thing you can do is act according to, prioritizing the experience itself, prioritizing yourself at the end of the day, the well-being of the situation at hand, not your idea of what you think the situation should be, because the kids are going to feel that a lot more than they think about, oh no, this relationship that they said was going to last forever isn't lasting forever. Like I can't say with absolute certainty, but I feel like that's a lot further from what the kid is actually feeling in those situations, especially the ones where people are staying together just, you know, for the kids.
And I think this largely goes back to what we've been saying this entire time, that because it's a relationship with yourself, it changes everything that you do. And with your children, especially, that is what you want to teach them. You want to teach them that they can be themselves, that they don't need a partner, that they don't need to settle for a toxic relationship, that they don't need to get out there and find somebody who validates them in order to be happy. Because in teaching them that they don't need to do those things, then they will have a very different life than many other people out there who currently think they do. And a lot of our relationships come down to just the lack that we feel in ourselves. Because if I don't feel like enough, I'm going to go towards anything that makes me feel like more. This is where a lot of our codependence comes from, right? And again, I want to mention to everybody, because I've been in a marriage for 18 years and that marriage has come to an end. It's no longer the relationship that it was. I live with my daughter. She lives on her own. We see each other. We do all of that. But the fact is that the relationship has now just become more or less a friendship. And that's just a label again. But the fact is that that wouldn't have been possible had I dwelled upon the hurt, had I judged myself as a failure, had I not put had I not put everything I had into the relationship every step of the way. I would have beat myself up. Maybe I could have done more. Maybe I could have made it different, all of that stuff. And because I didn't do those things, the relationship can continue to grow. I can continue to grow. And it's just because why would I do those things outside of this fiction of myself? I can put that down. I can put all of the pain that goes with that fiction down. And what I find is that life is beautiful and changing and full of potential for me and everybody that I'm involved with, so long as I don't hold on to them and keep them in place just because I'm afraid.
Well said. Allowing it to play out. And I think that's a fantastic spot to wrap up this episode. This has been a lot of fun, kind of unexpected relationship deep dive, but I think perfectly appropriate to everything that's happening with everything that both of us are going through. And I know a lot of people in the community, based on the discussions we've been having, are going through as well. So this has been a lot of fun, and it's powerful, the recognition that all you need is you, and those who come in and out of your life can just be appreciated. They don't need to be needed. They don't need to be necessarily sought after, or your happiness and joy and peace and whatever ability to fully experience your life doesn't have to be kept at bay until that perfect thing happens, because that perfect thing doesn't exist. It's just about seeing where you're at, being where you're at here and now, and the willingness to step into that change without quite so much fear, and just willingness to do so with a little bit less concern as you go through it.
And that lack of concern really does create less friction. And as you move forward, you start realizing that change does not have to be as difficult as you've perceived it to be. That a large part of the difficulty that you've been perceiving change to be has been your resistance to it, or your need for it to go a certain way, or your expectations. And so the more you let that go, the more change is just what it is. And you're left with your ability to make the most of it. And as long as you don't tell yourself you can't, you will always find a way to make the most of it. So thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. We really appreciate you being here. If you'd like to discuss this in more detail, definitely join us on Patreon, because we all go through this. Relationship is a big part of our existence. It's just that we tend to think it's a relationship with someone else or something else instead of a relationship with ourselves. So I am very grateful for this community, because it is built of people who are forming a relationship or getting a greater sensitivity for the relationship that they have with themselves. Thanks for being you. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.